The first episode kicks off with Tommy tied up in a mysterious hangar in the middle of the desert with a bag over his head. He's being held by a gang of drug dealers, whose boss soon arrives. Tommy doesn't panic, not even when the boss shoots one of his own foot soldiers. Instead, Tommy explains why he's there. He's a landman, someone who works for MTEX Oil, who's been sent to negotiate a surface lease for the land the gang owns. As he explains it, they own the land, but MTEX Oil has the mineral rights, which allows them to drill for oil there. Tommy and the gang leader eventually reach an agreement on the basis that both parties leave each other to do their business. MTEX Oil won't contact the DEA, and they'll also pay to pave a road for them and the dealers to come and go as they please. Tommy succeeds at getting them on the same page and explains that they're both selling products. Tommy's is just bigger. The leader signs the lease and lets him go. As Tommy gets in his car and leave, he explains all via voiceover. The oil industry makes $4.3 trillion a year in revenue, but someone has to be the bridge between the landowners and the oil tycoons. This is Tommy's job. 6 months later, a plane is landing on Tommy's new road on the land previously negotiated. When it arrives, drug dealers quickly load packages onto a small van. However, they don't see the large truck hurtling towards them. It doesn't brake in time, and the truck slams into the plane and van, causing a dramatic explosion and killing everyone. Elsewhere, Tommy's son Cooper is waking up for his first day on the oil patch. Before first light, he leaves the man camp and gets called into the truck of Luis, Armando, and Elvio, 3 workers who have been instructed by Tommy to help make his son a roughneck. Their first day starts badly when Cooper makes the mistake of ordering a latte at the coffee window. At home, Tommy has breakfast with his pals Dale and Nate, with the latter reminding him that he has to be in court for a deposition at 11 a.m. sharp. But no time for that, because Tommy gets a phone call about the plane. Tommy actually reported the plane as missing 6 weeks earlier, so he races to the site of the crash. When he gets there, Sheriff Walt is pissed that Tommy didn't initially call him about the missing plane. But Tommy doesn't care. He's got 4,200 barrels of oil that need transporting through that road, ASAP. He calls his team and instructs them to come out and build a new road around the crash, but not before asking the sheriff if he would kindly backdate his police report, or at least note that the FAA was notified. Tommy is trying to get through to a man named Monty Miller when he gets an irritated FaceTime call from his ex-wife, Angela. Angela asks Tommy to take care of his daughter, Ainsley, for the weekend while she's on vacation with her new husband. Why? Because she wants to stop her daughter from having sex with her heartthrob football player boyfriend. The idea of preventing his daughter from jumping into bed is enough to get Tommy to agree instantly. He finishes out his incredibly flirty call with Angela by discussing Cooper's first day on the oil patch. Soon after, he gets through to the suited and booted Texas oil titan, Monty Miller. Monty's having a high-rise lunch with some fellow big shots, but he stops to help Tommy organize some legal help for their new plane troubles. On the oil patch, Cooper is having a rough time. The fellas are playing a prank on him, asking him to climb up to the top of the well and fetch a completely fictional valve. On his way back down, he slips and falls. Luckily, he's wearing a harness, but it takes a lot of coaxing from Elvio to get him back down. At lunch, Tommy meets with a lawyer and his landowner client, who want to sue Tommy for damages to their land caused by a fire. Tommy tries to argue that it was a natural disaster, while the client argues over faulty drilling equipment. Smooth as he is, Tommy offers them $300,000 to avoid going through the official surface damages process, fronting the money as a solar lease so he can justify the payment. Tommy meets Ainsley at the airport, the two greeting each other happily. But Ainsley has managed to sneak her boyfriend onto the trip. His name is Dakota Loving, and he's about as big of a jerk as his name suggests. On the way home, the 3 stop at a football game, where it becomes clear Dakota is something of a minor celebrity. He flirts with other cheerleaders, which doesn't seem to concern Ainsley in the slightest. When Tommy presses her about whether they're being safe, she tells him sweetly that, well, Dakota is never allowed to finish in certain places, just on certain places. Needless to say, Tommy's expression is one of abject horror. Later in the stands, he watches as Dakota gropes Ainsley in front of the crowd, and his annoyance grows. At the end of a long, hard day on the job, Cooper gets invited into Luis, Armando, and Elvio's home for dinner. They attempt to teach him a little Spanish, and he learns Armando was once in prison and also has a daughter. Cooper then almost chokes eating spicy tacos. Back at home, Tommy and Ainsley's bizarre back and forth continues when he separates her and Dakota for the night. Standing in front of her father in her underwear, she asks if she can please sleep with Dakota on the couch, since she's never actually slept with him or woken up in his arms. Under the promise that they won't do anything more, Tommy relents. But when Ainsley goes into the living room and lays out the terms to Dakota, he looks baffled. The idea of not being able to go any further is completely off the table for him, and he refuses to let her sleep on the couch without anything else. Ainsley goes back into Tommy's room, sobbing. Tommy then comforts her and assures her that Dakota doesn't know what he's missing out on. The next day, the boys are hard at work back at the oil well. They ask Cooper to run and fetch a 24-inch pipe, which he struggles to find. While he's searching, Luis, Armando, and Elvio are hammering at a pipe, which slowly hisses, releasing gas. When Luis strikes another blow, the hammer sparks a flame. In seconds, the well erupts in a fiery explosion, knocking Cooper back into the air and onto the ground. Episode 2 opens with the aftermath of that horrific explosion in the first episode. Cooper is alive and conscious, but just barely. The same can't be said for Luis, Armando, or Elvio. At home, Tommy and Nate debate over whether it's cigarettes or sugar that kills you. Ainsley is still there, and when seeing that her boyfriend Dakota Loving is gone, she freaks out, despite being the one to tell him to leave in the first place. There's a brief naked run-in between Dale and Ainsley when he arrives home for a shower without knowing she's currently in there. That leaves him with a broken nose and her traumatized. After some bathroom negotiations, Tommy gets a call alerting him to the accident on Cooper's site. At his mansion, Monty tells Tommy an attorney is on the way to help deal with the plane fiasco from episode 1, but soon finds out about the blowout. From his pained and angered response, clearly Monty is under some stress. Tommy arrives at the accident and jumps into action. He finds Cooper, but seems less concerned with his son's safety than he is about finding out whether he shut the valve off. He succeeds in doing it himself, but mutilates his finger in the process. Nothing a cigarette on an explosion site can't fix. At the airport, attorney Rebecca Falcone arrives to help MTEX Oil sort out their latest woes. At the hospital, Tommy calls Angela to let her know about Ainsley's breakup and Cooper's accident. When a doctor comes to see him, Tommy denies surgery to replace the tip of his thumb and simply whips out a pocket knife. The doctor watches in horror as Tommy cuts off the mangled end of his finger so they can stitch it up. He then gets a call from the sheriff telling him they've found a body at the well, but it's so burned they can't tell who it is. In the ER, he talks to Cooper, who's distraught about the loss of his 3 new friends. But Tommy's been through this before, and he's more than prepared to skip the morning to do what he has to do and tell the Medina family what happened. He strongly encourages Cooper to think about another career before he'll have to do the same thing on his behalf. Monty and his family are at an athletics meet, watching his daughter compete. But Monty is still on the phone, trying to work out how to proceed after the accident. They agree to give the family of Luis, Armando, and Elvio some money for compensation. Tommy arrives at the Medina home with the troubling task of telling them all 3 men died. After another confusingly flirty call with Angela, Tommy agrees to meet Rebecca. He takes her to the site of the blowout, and the two argue whether the risk is just part of the job or whether it's down to neglect and faulty equipment. She wants to speak to Cooper, but Tommy deflects her. Despite their disagreements, Rebecca insists she's on his side. Monty and his wife, Cammie, are at a company dinner when he gets a call from Tommy, furious that they've sent Rebecca, who will come down hard on any poor standards. As he tells Monty, "You don't have a well that will pass OSHA standards, Monty." Clearly, they've been cutting corners somewhere. But Monty isn't having it, telling Tommy, "The boss is me, and don't you ever raise your fucking voice at me again." Tommy then has a run of bad phone calls, including ones from Ainsley asking for him to fetch her a burger, and Angela asking, yet again, if she needs to come to Midland to help with the kids. When Tommy gets home, he and Ainsley have dinner together. She finds out that Cooper dropped out of school to work on the patch for Tommy. When Ainsley absent-mindedly calls him a loser, Tommy looks hurt and tells her, "Losers come here to win." The next day, Cooper finally gets out of the hospital. In the car on the way home, he and Tommy argue about why Cooper wants to be a landman instead of finishing school. Cooper clearly wants to be like the wealthy Monty Miller, but Tommy tells him that for every Monty, there's 100 of him. When Cooper tells him the only difference between Tommy and Monty is that Monty didn't quit, Tommy slams the car to a stop. "I didn't quit, I bled out," he shouts at his son. He harshly reminds Cooper that his crew is now dead. But Cooper is insistent that he wants to run an oil company one day. He begs Tommy to put him on another crew. Despite hesitating, Tommy promises he will. Episode 3 kicks off with the face-to-face reveal of Angela, Tommy's ex-wife. The two have communicated only via FaceTime until now, but she's now arriving in Midland on a plane. Tommy looks less than enthused about her being there, and his reservations are quickly justified when she wants to spend the day at the country club under Monty's dime. Speaking of Monty, the oil tycoon is at the golf course, trying to get some sense out of his lawyer. He wants to know why they sent Rebecca, an aggressive young attorney, to take on their missing plane case. Unfortunately for Monty, his legal advisor has a point. They failed to report an asset going missing which was then used for drug running. Clearly shoving the blame onto Tommy, he also encourages Monty to report his landman for not working to standards. However, as Monty points out, if every oil company was made to report dodgy dealings, then they'd all be shut down. Still, there's an $80 million lawsuit on the line, and Monty needs to get his ducks in a row. Cooper is back at the man camp after the fatal explosion that killed Luis, Armando, and Elvio, but it's not smooth sailing. He's attacked by two men, Luis, Armando, and Elvio's cousins. But Cooper has high school wrestling on his side, and he quickly disarms them. They're frustrated that Cooper survived while the other men died, and struggle to understand how he made it out. Thankfully, the boss of the crew, aptly named Boss, turns up and takes a liking to Cooper, inviting him to join his crew. Well, wouldn't you know it, but Boss crew also consists of Cooper's attackers. Not quite the comeback he was hoping for. The rest of the Norris family is at the country club and chugging down margaritas, and Angela gives some advice to Ainsley to help her get over her now ex-boyfriend, the deplorable Dakota Loving. Meanwhile, Tommy is fighting for his life to stop Angela from getting too rowdy and getting Monty's membership revoked. Tommy then gets a call from Rebecca, who wants to see the plane crash site. Tommy leaves Angela and Ainsley stripped down by the poolside, bullying a poor young waiter into not serving them any more drinks. On the way to pick up Rebecca, Tommy calls Nate. The latter is panicking about the legal repercussions and begs Tommy to get Rebecca on their side, even if it means sleeping with her. On the other side of town, Cooper has arrived at Louis' family home, where a funeral is taking place. He's invited inside, all the while receiving glares from his new oil crew. He's given a plate of food and a seat next to Elvio's wife, who has a new baby in her arms. The two hit it off, and she eventually cries, leaning on his shoulder for support. Tommy and Rebecca are already clashing at the plane site. When she presses him on why he didn't report the plane as being stolen, he schools her in oil law. As he explains it, equipment goes missing all the time, and usually gets returned after a while. From his perspective, it's more effort to get the authorities involved. The two spot some wind turbines, and Rebecca is quick to slam the oil industry. But Tommy isn't fazed. He doesn't believe green energy is coming for oil. In fact, he tells her that everything needs oil, even the turbines. Our whole lives depend on oil, he tells her. We're going to run out of it before we find its replacement. We don't do it because we like it. We do it because we've run out of options. Before they head back out, there's a classic Sheridan encounter with a snake that leaves Rebecca rooted to the ground in fear before Tommy chops its head off with a shovel. When Tommy gets back to the country club, Angela and Ainsley have passed out in the sun loungers after a margarita overload. After tossing Angela in the pool to wake her up, he drives them both back to his house. On the way in, a drunken Ainsley asks him if she can live with him until she goes to college. In Tommy's room, Angela goes about seducing him. She even admits that she wants to get back together with him, but the mood is instantly killed when he tells her what Ainsley said. Distressed over the idea of going back to a big house all on her own, she gets mad and laments her life choices. Cooper's morning with his new crew goes a lot like his first. There's an early morning coffee run in the pitch black, only this time, he has a knife held to his leg by Louis' cousin, who warns him not to go near Elvio's wife again. Later, Tommy calls Monty with a new problem. There's a well that's over 35 years old and not producing anymore, so they decide to go ahead and kill it. Monty's wife Cammie stresses over Monty's constant worries and encourages him to take his medication. On the job, Tommy rolls up and watches as Cooper and the crew begin to disassemble the well. In episode 4, we start as Taylor Sheridan means to go on, with more focus on Ainsley and Angela's sexuality being an inconvenience to the men around them. While Nate stresses about the ladies working out semi-naked in the living room, Tommy's on his way to the deposition for the plane theft. He's being sued for not informing the authorities about the plane being stolen, which then led to the deaths of several people after a truck crashed into it while it was parked on the road for a drug drop. However, MTEX's lawyer, Rebecca, proves to be worth every penny. She quickly takes down the prosecution counsel during the meeting, accusing them of sexist remarks and wasting everyone's time when A, Tommy reported the theft to the FAA, and B, the crash was on a private road the truck shouldn't have been using. After ripping apart the other counsel, she demands they surrender the case, which they reluctantly agree to. Tommy absolutely loves her approach and invites her to have a drink. At the bar shortly after, Tommy and Rebecca continue their feud when they get into a debate over a local sex worker's moral compass. But Rebecca slowly starts to understand him when he explains what it means to go through an oil bust in a town like this. Everyone loses everything. Meanwhile, a bored Ainsley and Angela attempt to get into the country club but are turned away for a private event. So they drive around and head to the same bar where Tommy and Rebecca are currently drinking. While Tommy is explaining Monty Miller's backstory to Rebecca, how he made his fortune after being raised in a trailer park, Angela spots them across the bar. Her intent is clear. It's time to make trouble. Angela and Ainsley wander over, and it doesn't take long for Angela to insult Rebecca, telling her that her name sounds like a Marvel character, and then invite her over to join them for dinner. Meanwhile, at the oil well, Cooper and his new crew are working through the night to get the well set up for the morning. However, chaos strikes when Antonio gets his hand crushed on the mechanics. Cooper and Manuel race up to help him, but he passes out before they can get him down. Cooper then hoists Antonio all the way down the well, and he's promptly rushed off to the hospital by Dale. The boys need to get the well finished by morning, so Cooper is sent up to feed the line in the pine in Antonio's place, a task he's not yet attempted. Back at the bar, Angela is regaling Ainsley and Rebecca with a story about how Tommy once surprised her with tickets to a George Strait concert. It's a sweet memory, but the moment becomes sour when Angela tears up and tells them that shortly after, the markets crashed and the oil bust came, meaning they lost everything they had. And I do mean everything, she tells them. Tommy, suddenly uncomfortable, makes an excuse to leave the table. While Angela cries, Ainsley tells Rebecca that Tommy doesn't like to talk about the bust. Rebecca offers to drive the ladies home. On the way back, Rebecca interrogates Angela as to why she's jealous of Tommy when they're no longer married. Defensive, Angela reminds Rebecca that she could sleep with her boyfriend, and there's nothing you could do about it. She also tells her that Tommy needs calamity in order to feel like a man, and that Rebecca isn't his type. When Tommy gets home, Nate is still up late, working on settlements for Luis's family to counter a lawsuit before it happens. He then finds Ainsley on the couch, who's mad at Angela. She's a quitter. The market crashes and she leaves you, she points out. But Tommy empathizes with Angela and defends her. Even so, Ainsley promises Tommy that she'd never leave him, no matter what the market does. Speaking of Angela, he then goes into his bedroom to find her weeping in bed. She regrets ending their marriage, but Tommy reminds her that they had a terrible relationship. That may be the truth, but Angela still tells him that she's going to leave her current husband. After some convincing and pleading on her part, Tommy agrees to get back together with her. The next morning, Ainsley wanders into the kitchen and frightens Nate in her half-dressed state. Tommy tells her to put some clothes on, to which she replies that the only clothes she brought were ones to seduce her boyfriend. Why does Sheridan keep writing stuff like this? When Angela comes down and Ainsley works out that the two are back together, she's elated. The three have a f***ed-up family hug before Tommy heads out to the well. Thankfully, it's up and working just fine, with Boss telling Tommy just how much Cooper stepped up to get it finished. Tommy tells Monty over the phone that it's now working brilliantly, before going over to his son and telling him he needs to come home and see his mother. Cooper isn't nearly as happy as Ainsley about the news of his parents getting back together. As Tommy leaves, Cooper gets a call from Ariana, Elvio's widow. Upset, she asks him to come and see her. Knowing it would get him in deep trouble with her cousins, he says yes anyway. Episode 5 begins as Tommy calls Monty and asks if they can check all the wells in that field. Most of them are old, and although Monty is hesitant to spend the money and time checking them, he gives Tommy permission to start going through them one by one. Meanwhile, Cooper is on his way to see Ariana, Elvio's widow. Despite being warned by Manuel not to go near her, Cooper shows up at her door. She's overwhelmed with paperwork and bills, so Cooper helps her go through it all and offers to mow her front lawn. In the city, Monty sits with a group of suits around a lunch table, and he listens to them debate the next source of energy. He shuts them down, telling them it doesn't actually affect them what happens with the energy once they pump the oil. All he cares about is the price of the it. They laugh at his abrasiveness, but another colleague cautiously reminds him that the party is ending when it comes to oil, and that Monty should find another venture. Cooper is mowing the lawn and bonding with Ariana over her new baby, and she teases him about his shyness when discussing her body. They also connect over Elvio's death, since he was the first person Cooper has known to have died in his life. Ariana shares her grandmother's advice for dealing with the troubles of life, to stay young in your heart. But trouble strikes when Cooper is mowing the front lawn. Manuel pulls up in his car and points a gun at him. However, Ariana comes out and tells Manuel it's none of his business who helps her. When Manuel insists Cooper only wants one thing, Ariana kisses him in front of Manuel and threatens to call the police. Before he leaves, Manuel makes a thinly veiled threat against Cooper once more. Rebecca turns up at the Norris household to settle some business with Nate over Luis's grieving family. She insists they pay them more than he assumes is enough. Anything to stop a potential $50 million lawsuit. Their meeting is interrupted when a furniture truck arrives, delivering a house's worth of new decor ordered by Angela, on her current husband's credit card, of course. Outside, Ainsley makes a new friend. Their neighbor calls out to her and asks if she wants to join her at a patch party, a gathering at one of the oil wells with music and drinks. Happy to have made a connection, Ainsley accepts. Tommy, Boss, and Dale start checking out the wells in the remaining field. It's not going well, and because nobody has replaced Luis's crew, Tommy wants to shift the patch to Boss instead. However, they're interrupted when the cartel Tommy leases the land from shows up. Dale records the whole meeting on his phone, which consists of the gang leader, Jimmy, telling Tommy he owes him money for the lost product in the plane crash. Around $30 million to be exact. Tommy fights back, telling them that all the lawsuits and mess he's in is down to them and that they'll never win against a multi-billion-dollar corporation. The cartel leaves after threatening to blow up the wells, and Boss quickly tells Tommy he won't be stepping foot on that patch until the problem is resolved. Soon after, Tommy calls Monty and tells him he'll come and see him the next day to explain their new predicament. Back at Ariana's house, she apologizes for kissing Cooper without warning. She even offers him dinner, but he tells her he has to get back home for a new mandated family dinner. Speaking of family dinner, Tommy arrives home to see his rented house completely renovated, thanks to Angela's new delivery. Cooper arrives, and after an awkward greeting with his mother, everyone, Dale and Nate included, sits down around the table. As they eat, Angela gets emotional over the fact that this is the first time their family has been together in 10 years. But it's not happy for everyone, Ainsley and Cooper bicker, and Tommy looks like he wants to be anywhere else. When nobody's willing to talk about their day, Angela gets upset and leaves the table, crying. Tommy follows her into the kitchen, where he offers her a little comfort in his own way. He tells her she's more than welcome to make dinner and set up home, but she has to understand that she may not get the response she's looking for. The two make up, but not before she delivers a punch, literally. At the dining table, Ainsley is smiling, happy to hear her parents getting along. But Cooper is cynical, telling her that he's not happy because he's old enough to remember what it was like when they were first together. As he drives home, Cooper gets another call from Ariana. She's frightened to be in the house by herself, but he assures her and helps her calm down. When he arrives back at his trailer at the man camp, he's suddenly viciously attacked by Manuel and his gang. The next morning, Tommy is up early, getting ready to drive to Monty's. Angela joins him, telling him she needs to go meet her husband Victor face to face to tell him she's leaving him. She also asks him whether he really believes they have a chance, to which he tells her, "We don't have an ice cube's chance in hell of making this work." But, as he adds, he just can't say no to her. Meanwhile, Boss is waiting for Cooper, who doesn't show up for his morning start. Manuel is stressed and tells Boss to leave him behind. So they drive off, with Boss not knowing that Cooper is currently lying unconscious on his trailer floor. Tommy and Angela are on their way to Monty until Tommy gets a call from one of the rigs, where a worker is annoyed that a delivery of pipes arrived wrong. They make a detour to the rig, where Tommy finds the worker ranting about the problem. In a rage, he jumps on the pile. But tragedy strikes when it collapses, the weight of the pipes falling on top of him and crushing his chest, pinning him underneath. The well becomes a source of chaos, since they can't take the pipes off, otherwise he'll bleed out. Tommy hands him his phone so the worker can call his wife, knowing he's dying. But she doesn't pick up, and when Tommy attempts to call 911, the man stops breathing before any help can come. As Tommy drops the phone, he looks over and sees that Angela has been watching the gruesome scene. Fifth episode begins with Tommy and Angela Norris arriving in Fort Worth for their respective meetings. They are welcomed by Cammie Miller, who invites Angela to her house. However, the latter has another plan: to retrieve her Bentley from her husband, Victor Ramsey's garage. While she rushes to her rich partner's house to break up with him, the Landman explains the situation with Jimenez to Monty Miller. He reveals that the businessman should intervene with political pressure on the cartel to eliminate the threat of the drug lord. Monty is not too excited about the predicament, but promises to make calls to deal with the situation so that Tommy and his crew can move forward with building wells on Jimenez's property. While Tommy discusses company affairs with Monty, Sheriff Walt tries to reach him to explain what happened to the former's son, Cooper. Since he has forgotten to take his phone from his truck, he doesn't get the calls, only for Nathan to call Monty to reach the Landman. After learning about Cooper's near-death experience, he rushes back to Odessa. Meanwhile, Angela is welcomed by two lawyers at her house, rather than Victor. They explain the terms and conditions of the dissolution of her marriage with her wealthy partner. While the attorneys delve into the specifics of the matter, she asks them about her Bentley, which she can use since it is a gift. In addition to the car, Victor is ready to contribute to Ainsley's expenses until she turns 18, even though he is not her biological father. He even wrote a letter to the teenage girl, possibly about the dissolution of his marriage with the latter's mother. After stealing a couple of expensive wine bottles, Angela starts her return journey to Odessa in her Bentley. She is distressed about seeing her replacement at Victor's house, which makes her feel worse. For emotional support, she calls Tommy, only to learn that her son, Cooper, is in critical condition in a hospital. Ariana joins the wives of Luis Medina and Armando to discuss a settlement with Rebecca and Nathan, who meet them as the representatives of MTEX Oil. The latter starts the discussion by offering $250,000 each to all three widows to deal with the aftermath of the unbearable tragedy that killed their husbands. The wives of Luis and Armando accept the offer in no time, since it is a significant amount for them. However, Ariana is not ready to take it without raising any questions. She asks the lawyers to explain the conditions of the settlement agreement, only for Nathan to reveal that the families cannot sue the oil company after signing the same. When Ariana hesitates to sign the settlement, Rebecca clarifies that her only other option is hiring a superior lawyer and proving in the court that her husband, Elvio, died due to MTEX Oil's fault. She makes it sound like an impossible feat for a widow who struggles to deal with life's many burdens and responsibilities. The attorney also adds that such a lawsuit will make the company's representatives prove the tragedy occurred due to the fault of Ariana's husband, which will add to the complexities involved in the case. The young widow calls Cooper to be clear about the settlement, only for Walt to inform her about the roughnecks' near-death experience. After learning about Cooper's state, Ariana rushes to the hospital without making a decision about the settlement. Rebecca wants an answer from her, but she cannot wait for the lawyers. When she reaches the hospital, Ainsley asks her to explain her relationship with Cooper, only for her to reply that it is hard to explain, but the teenager learns enough from the response. The roughneck asks Ariana not to think that she is at fault. He clarifies that the attack was about Manuel rather than Elvio. As she comforts him, Tommy and Angela arrive at the hospital to check in on their son. It does not take long for the Landman to realize what needs to be done. Tommy and Dale Bradley leave for the patch with tools to meet Manuel and Antonio, who led the attack against Cooper. The Landman and the engineer are joined by Boss, whose real name happens to be Theodore Ramon. Theodore feels responsible for the situation since he is the leader of both Manuel and Cooper. He wants to make things right by forcing Antonio to confess who else was on the trailer when the men beat up the Landman's son. While he handles the second-in-command, Tommy deals with the commander by beating him up first. The Landman fires Manuel and informs him about Walt's arrival to arrest him. Tommy and Walt join hands together to put several charges on Manuel, which violates his parole conditions. In addition to his existing sentence, he faces 30 more years in prison for laying his hands on Cooper. The Landman warns him that the former will take the rest of his years if he ever returns to the patch. The message is clear not only to Manuel, but also to the entire patch. Do not mess with Tommy's family. After settling the predicament, the Landman confronts the grim reality before him. Cooper cannot survive at the patch. However, he does not know how to make his son leave, even though it is likely necessary. Seventh episode begins as one of Monty's industrialist friends named Danny Blanton offered him a deal, according to which Monty's company can drill more wells on his leased land, and in return, Monty just needs to share 40% of the return. In Phase 1, they had planned to drill some 54 wells, which, according to their research, could produce 200 barrels. However, the main issue here was that none of the banks in the country were ready to fund the refineries anymore, and Danny wanted Monty to invest in the project. However, confirming the deal, Monty first decided to consult Tommy about it, where the latter told him that the entire valley was covered with smugglers, and it was going to be a huge task to make any profits working in such risky territory. They'll have to incur extra expenses on fencing and security that will increase the production cost per well up to $750 per barrel. In short, Tommy told his boss that the job itself is not impossible, but making any profits out of it is. Well, Monty just heard what he wanted to hear and decided to put in his $300 million into the deal. However, before signing the deal, he told Danny that he would keep 100% of the production until he had recovered the cost, and 70% for 12 months after that. Finally, when in perpetuity, he would keep 65% of the production, and Danny could keep the rest. It was obvious that Danny wasn't happy with the offer, but he didn't have any other option but to agree to Monty's terms. In Landman Episode 7, Ainsley finally found some friends her own age to hang around. During the night party, she met a guy named Ryder Sampson, who was a quarterback. Well, Ainsley did find him attractive, especially because he played football, and therefore decided to spend some time with him. While sitting in the back of his truck, Ainsley told Ryder that she would be getting a degree in philanthropy from university. She wanted to help her future husband, who would be an NFL quarterback, to evade taxes. So I am sure the showmakers wanted to make Ainsley sound as stupid as they can, but here, someone really crossed the line. Anyway, before anything could happen between Ainsley and Ryder, Angela, who had set a tracker on her daughter's phone, asked a snoring Tommy to get into his truck and bring their daughter home. Tommy quickly arrived at the spot and interrupted the two lovebirds. Though Ainsley made sure that she was going to see Ryder again, so we can hope to see them together again in the upcoming episodes. In the previous episode, the cartel men had threatened Tommy that they wouldn't let him carry out his business until and unless he and his boss had paid back the money they lost in the stolen airplane accident. In episode 7, another batch of cartel men arrived near the oil well and asked Tommy to pay them before MTEX or its men drilled another hole in the land. Tommy knew something like this was going to happen, which was why he had asked Boss to put some gun-wielding gangsters on the team so that they could give the cartel a taste of their own medicine. But even though Tommy had dealt with the situation for the time being, it seemed like someone had been keeping a close watch on Tommy and his daughter. And if I am not wrong, then they are going to abduct Ainsley, just like they had picked up Tommy in the first episode. They knew that Tommy was a tough nut to crack, but when he would see a threat to his family, he would really get the message that he was acting tough in front of the wrong men here. In the previous episode, Tommy had already mentioned to Dale that his children weren't safe with him, and Ainsley's kidnapping would solidify his concerns. As soon as Cooper got discharged from the hospital, Ariana decided to bring him to her own house, maybe as some sort of atonement, as she blamed herself for Cooper's condition. Also, she had been feeling quite alone after her husband's death and wanted someone to be around to make her feel safe, which does sound like a more concrete reason to bring Cooper home. The next day, Rebecca and Nathan paid a visit to Ariana, as she still hadn't signed MTEX's bereavement offer. The thing is, Rebecca had been trying quite hard to settle the matter as soon as possible so she could leave the city and go back. Except for Ariana, everyone had taken the offer, but Rebecca refused to sign as she believed MTEX Oil could be responsible for her husband's death and therefore wanted to consult with Cooper before making any decisions. And here he was, Cooper, sitting beside Ariana, and Rebecca could very well see what was happening between them. I guess the way Rebecca asked Cooper for his last name suggested that she thought something sinister was going on in her mind. I mean, she obviously figured out that Cooper is Tommy's son, and the latter works for the same company against which his son's girlfriend is planning to bring legal action. Furthermore, Rebecca was aware of the fact that Cooper was present when the three Medinas lost their lives, which, in a way, means it's quite easy for Rebecca to pin all the blame on Cooper and hold him responsible for the Medina's death, just like the rest of the patch. I guess Rebecca is going to use Copper to force Ariana to sign the bereavement offer, and the widowed mother, who had already been feeling guilty for Cooper's plight, might sign the papers without any further ado. 8th episode begins as Rebecca threatened Cooper that she would start a criminal investigation against him if he didn't convince the grieving widow to sign the papers. However, Cooper didn't budge. He wasn't going to let a city lawyer teach him the law, especially when he knew that the explosion on the pump jack wasn't the workers' fault. It was Monty and his company's fault, as none of their oil wells meet the OSHA standards. The Medinas were trying to open, or close, a rusted valve when the explosion happened, and the only person responsible for their death was Monty. Nevertheless, Cooper knew that he or Ariana wouldn't be able to win a legal battle against the Goliath, which was why he made a counteroffer that the company needed to pay $1 million each to all three families to compensate them for their loss. And if they refused to do so, they would file environmental claims and request TCEQ to do a safety check on MTEX equipment, which Monty had already been told doesn't pass the OSHA standards. So, even though Ariana and Cooper wouldn't be able to win the legal battle, Cooper was going to make sure they brought Monty and his MTEX down with them. Well, Rebecca knew that would cost them more than what the grieving families were seeking, which forced Rebecca to accept her defeat, though she didn't take it lightly. In the end, Ariana signed the papers, and with Cooper's help, she finally became a millionaire. Also, Cooper quit his job because Monty would have fired him anyway after the entire fiasco. Monty, who had been sipping herbal tea earlier in the episode in an attempt to live healthy, started to hyperventilate after Cooper's betrayal. Well, no rich man takes a defeat lightly, and Monty had already been under a lot of stress lately because he was losing money from all sides. He called Tommy, but couldn't tell him about the stunt that his son had pulled off. However, he really wanted to get it out of his system, and therefore made a second call from the hospital, which just made Tommy realize that things have really gotten out of hand. Also, Angela took the residents of the old age home for a short trip to the games parlor. And later that day, Ainsley went out for some Bible reading with her new guy, Ryder Sampson. This subplot is going to give Tommy a heart attack too, sooner or later. At the beginning of the episode, Monty requested that the governor use his land for military training, which, in a way, would keep the cartel in check. Well, the problem here was that during military maneuvers, the troops constantly shot guns and dropped bombs, which means if any stray rounds or artillery ever hit an oil well, then there were going to be fireworks all around in broad daylight, and Monty wouldn't be able to afford that. Well, it seems like he had a plan. He offered the Texas National Guard a patch of land in Odessa that was away from any oil rig. Later, Monty's landman Tommy escorted Colonel Ivy and his convoy to the land that Monty had promised the National Guard could set up a training base on. Before meeting Rebecca at the patch, Tommy made a short stop at Ariana's house to understand what's really going on between her and his son, Cooper. Well, it turned out even Ariana wasn't sure of her feelings for Cooper, but she did know that no one has ever looked at her the way Cooper does, not even her dead husband. Well, the detour was worth it to make Tommy realize that the two are in love, even if they don't want to put a name tag on it yet. Tommy finally arrived at the patch to hear what Rebecca had to say. He already knew her ego was bruised and that she was looking for the means to take her revenge. But before she could speak any further, Tommy just said in very plain and simple words that if she dared to come after his family, then she would face his wrath first. He wouldn't give a damn what degree she holds or what law firm she works for, because he's going to show her her place. And it's not because he was Cooper's father. It's because Cooper did nothing wrong. The family who sent their loved ones to work on the wells deserved the compensation, and no one, not even Monty himself, could put a price tag on the lives lost because of their own failure. In short, if Rebecca really wants to take up this futile battle because her ego was hurt, then it's not going to end well for her. Colonel Ivy had told Tommy that they were planning to bring in an assault helicopter unit, and I guess they had already started their training to drop bombs. Well, they did drop one on Monty and Tommy, if no one else. In Landman Episode 8's ending, the cartel was smuggling drugs through the barren patch of land, which I guess Monty had lent to the National Guard for their training. Before the cartel men could leave the location, some bombs started to drop that exploded one of the cartel's vehicles carrying the drugs. The bombings not only destroyed their product, but also killed their men on the spot. Now, judging from the pilot's reaction, it didn't seem like a planned attack. But the cartel wouldn't see it like that. They are obviously going to believe that Monty and Tommy sent the U.S. military to get rid of them, and that this act of bombing their men and vehicles was nothing short of a declaration of war. If that's how they're going to see it, then they would retaliate, and it would be Tommy who might have to pay the price for such someone else's mistake. As the 9th episode of Landman begins, Tommy Norris gets a call from Colonel Ivy complaining about people being out there. Tommy, who is at the Fort Worth hospital, learns about the man who was killed in the explosion. He tells Ivy to get the pilot away from there because the cartel will clean up its own mess. Tommy promises that the mess will be cleaned up. Then he gets in touch with Jimenez, who warns him he has an army as well. Tommy offers to call the sheriff, or let Jimenez go back out there and get what's his. Jimenez says he'll clean up the mess, and he might just clean Tommy up too. Tommy tells him they need to find a way to stay out of each other's way. Jimenez wants to meet. He warns Tommy that his boss may not be his boss for much longer. After the intro, Ainsley and Angela Norris visit Rick's cabaret. Angela tells Mel that she's the entertainment director for a nursing home, and they can check off a few bucket list items at the facility. He offers to rent them the space for an hour for $1,000. It'll be another $250 and tips for the girl. Ainsley asks about male strippers. Mel tells Angela she'll have to provide that. Ainsley has an idea for that. Tommy speaks to Kami Miller. He finds Jerry Jones speaks to Monty Miller. Jerry explains why his kids are involved in everything. Jerry gives Monty and Tommy a lecture. Once he leaves, Tommy tells Monty he needs to get those leases together because it's over $1 billion. Monty believes his dad died of boredom after he retired. He admits this is his third bypass. Monty believes he just has a busted heart. He decides to make Tommy vice president of operations. Tommy tells him they don't need Rebecca anymore. He claims she's a liability because of the way she works. Monty reveals she says the same thing about him. He's offering Rebecca the job of vice president of exploration because she's the shrewdest negotiator he's ever seen. Monty tells Tommy to find a way to work with her. Monty learns that his daughters aren't out there. Tommy tells Kami that Monty will need another speech from her. It needs to be the quit or else kind. Tommy calls Angela to tell her he loves her. Angela talks to him about the club and asks for a doctor to keep an eye on the old folks. Tommy calls Ainsley next. She tells him about the strip club. Ariana makes it home with the baby. Cooper steps outside to get the groceries, but he's unable to carry them inside. He tells Ariana that Mexican women are bossy. Inside, she asks what he's studying for. Cooper says their future. She asks him to focus on his life and see where it goes. Ariana wants to know what his plan is. Cooper explains he's the opposite of a plan. He shows Ariana prove that he won't quit. Cooper says he only has desire. When Ariana hears the dog barking, she says God is begging them not to do this. A salesman is at the door trying to sell carpet cleaner. Ariana closes the door before getting rough with Cooper. Tommy makes it home and tells Nathan about Monty. Nathan isn't happy to learn that Rebecca is his boss now. When Angela says dinner is ready, Tommy decides to check on Ainsley and Ryder. Ainsley tries to convince Ryder to dance for the nursing home women. She pretends she's reading the Bible when Tommy arrives. Dale and the others sit around the table. Dale and Angela argue about whether she made jambalaya or something else. Ryder is forced to say grace. Tommy eventually interrupts. He doesn't like having to stand up to get a scoop of food. Tommy gets plates. He ends up upsetting Angela, who leaves the room. They continue arguing outside. Angela claims she did this to be nice, but Tommy thinks she wanted to be appreciated. He says he does appreciate it. Tommy doesn't like the expectations after everything he had to do today. He explains she can do what she wants, but he doesn't want to be expected to participate. Ryder tells Ainsley he's ready to negotiate. She asks if he wants to go upstairs. Tommy tries to stop them from going upstairs and having sex. Angela lets them go. She asks Tommy if he remembers what it was like when he was 17. Tommy asks for them to turn on some music. In private, Ryder tells Ainsley what he wants. Ariana wakes up and finds Cooper awake and working on the computer. He's looking at Midland records. He shows her Wolfcamp Shale on a map and explains it's the richest oil field in the world. He tells her about the possibilities for drilling the oil. Cooper says he's going to take the money, go there, cobble them all together, and sell them. He points out Clear Fork Field, which has a lot of older production. Cooper will try to get leases on the existing wells or do farm-outs. He'll increase the production of the old wells until he has enough money to drill in Wolfcamp. Then they find a nice house in Fort Worth. Monty remains in the hospital. He begins struggling and calling for help. Tommy finds a note from Angela who says she's with the old folks. Nathan complains about not having his cereal. Dale isn't happy with the new food choices either. Once Tommy steps outside, he gets a call from Kami, who gives him the news. Cooper visits one of the fields to speak to Perry Harden. He tells Perry that his oil lease expired in 1997 and he wants it. Perry says it's dried up. Cooper claims he can help make it worth something for his grandkids. When Perry says he wants 20%, Cooper says he wants 25%. Perry takes him into the house so business can be done over coffee. Tommy watches as a neighbor kills a wild animal and complains about them killing pets. 10th episode, titled The Crumbs of Hope, begins with Tommy Norris learning that Monty Miller has named him as the president of MTEX Oil to run the company when the latter is in an incapable state or dead. The Landman is asked to operate the firm until the same is sold for the sake of Cammy and their 2 daughters. Tommy is also named as the executor of Monty's trust after his passing to help the businessman's wife deal with financial matters. While the protagonist comprehends his new role, a doctor informs Cammy that her husband suffered from a ruptured aortic aneurysm and is in need of a heart transplant. Until Monty receives a new heart, he will remain under observation with medical equipment attached to keep him alive. Tommy's first order of business as the new head of the oil company is the farm out approved by his boss, which is worth more than $160 million. The project is extremely risky and can potentially bankrupt the Millers. The Landman explains to Cammy the worst and best case scenarios, the latter being making over $1 billion after moving ahead with the project. After much deliberation, she decides to greenlight the farm out and play one last poker game. After she makes her decision, Tommy reaches out to Rebecca Falcone to renegotiate the farm out deal. Even though Tommy does not like Rebecca at all, he does not want to fire her after she has won the approval of his boss, Monty. The Landman also recognizes her negotiating skills, which is something Nathan lacks as a lawyer with ethics. The protagonist calls his longtime colleague and explains why he has chosen her for the time being. As per Tommy's instruction, Dale and Nathan teach Rebecca what a farm out is so that she can strike a better deal with minimal financial risks. The Landman does not want to spend over $160 million on 9 oil wells and get nothing back, which will significantly affect the Miller family's financial state. After Tommy gives instructions to Rebecca, he is pursued by Jimenez and his gang, who abduct the Landman to teach him a lesson. The drug dealer blasts multiple oil wells to show his authority over his adversary without knowing that there is a built-in alarm system on the patch that will keep the authorities at the crime scene for a long while, affecting the drug cartel significantly. After realizing that he messed up, Jimenez ties Tommy up and severely hurts him. However, before the drug dealer can kill the Landman, a mysterious figure shows up with a group of men and kills the former and his gang without sparing one. The person is revealed to be Galino, Jimenez's boss and a prominent leader of an international drug cartel. He saves Tommy because he realizes that killing the Landman will attract unnecessary attention to the oil patches, which is a significant territory for his drug operations. If Jimenez had killed the crisis executive, it would have sent a damaging message to other oil companies. They may take preventive measures to avoid a similar setback by relying on authorities, which will hurt Galino's drug trade. Since some of these companies have former presidents on the board, they can easily invite the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, to camp on the patches, which is not going to help the cartel. Jimenez tries to kill Tommy because he sees the conflict they have as a personal matter. On the other hand, Galino approaches the same as an outright business affair. As a businessman, he dismisses his ego and looks at the numbers alone. It may not have taken him a long time to realize that cooperating with oil companies, rather than threatening or antagonizing them, is the best decision he can make to protect his interests. That is why Galino holds out an olive branch to Tommy. What he means by saving the Landman is that he wants them to share a sense of unusual goodwill for their own betterment. Since the oil companies have nothing to gain from the explosions of wells, Tommy has a reason to accept the cartel leader's proposal of peace and cooperation. Interestingly, Galino's presence in Tommy's life may not be limited to the cooperation they discuss. The cartel leader tells the Landman that they should sit down for a discussion regarding oil wells, which sheds light on the former's possible interest in being an oil tycoon. If he does that, especially with the support of an industry giant like MTEX Oil, he can ensure that the aforementioned cooperation will prevail throughout the Permian Basin. Galino may have realized that being one of the oil tycoons promises him a seat at the table that can be used to propose matters that protect his interests as a cartel leader. As The Crumbs of Hope concludes, Monty Miller is shown laying on a bed with Cammy and their 2 children crying their hearts out. The intense moment that materializes out of nowhere, especially after she keeps her calm throughout her husband's surgery, may confuse or alarm viewers concerning the fate of the businessman. The monitors that are out of focus in this scene add mystery to what really happens to Monty. However, it appears to us that he is still alive. The emotionally charged moment can be the result of the family getting together after the oil tycoon is shifted to a room after his surgery. Since Monty is a high-profile client, if he is really dead, doctors and nurses must have already rushed to the room to treat him. Instead, the scene shows members of the hospital staff casually walking in front of the room without even taking a look at what's happening inside. The scene cannot be the aftermath of the doctor's visit since they might have removed the pipes attached to Monty, so his family could spend some time with him for the last time. Considering these factors, the businessman appears to be alive and hanging in there for one last fight to defeat death. Cooper and Ariana's relationship strengthens after they start to share intimacy regularly. They embrace their doubts and uncertainties to cherish their togetherness. However, their happiness is affected when she starts to pack the belongings of her late husband, Elvio. The things that have been part of their married life transports her to the past. She immerses herself in her memories of the roughneck, which affects her ability to move on from him and accept Cooper as his man. This challenge threatens their relationship and plants seeds of more doubts in her. Irrespective of Ariana's doubts, Cooper deals with the situation in the best way possible. Rather than asking or expecting her to move on from Elvio, he joins her in mourning him as a companion. He offers her his shoulder to lean on and remember her late husband as much as she wants. As far as he is concerned, there is no need to rush things that concern their relationship, which gives Ariana ample time and space to process her grief. Cooper's maturity convinces her that she made the right decision to be with him. The fact that he is comfortable with her grief and past makes her trust him even more. Cooper does not try to uproot Elvio from Ariana, even though he has replaced his dead colleague in her life. Since he accepts her late husband's presence, she does not need to hide her memories from him. Therefore, Ariana does not have to process her grief alone, which might have created a sense of distance between her and Cooper. Since they are in it together, their relationship is stronger than ever for them to end up together. Cooper and Ariana are not the only ones who take their relationship to the next stage. After much deliberation, Ryder decides to transform himself into an erotic dancer to please a few ladies for the sake of his girlfriend, Ainsley. He shows her that he is a keeper by doing something he does not want to do to make his partner happy. She repays his sacrifice or courage by showing him a good time. After cherishing the experience she promises him, they lay together, which immensely moves her emotionally. Ainsley has enjoyed several flings or short-lived casual relationships. However, she never had a serious boyfriend who stayed in her life. Ryder is gradually becoming that person. Since he met Ainsley, he has prioritized her interests over his, showing how much she means to him. He has tolerated Tommy's outrageous rules and threats without any sort of retaliation that is expected from a young man. Even though he can possibly form a relationship with any girl he wants, he even becomes an erotic dancer to make Ainsley happy, which is a sign that shows her he is in for the long run. This realization makes their relationship real rather than a casual, short-term one. When Ryder chooses to spend the night with her, even though he knows that Tommy will likely beat the hell out of him, it tells her that he is ready to endure anything for her. Therefore, we may not need to expect Ainsley and Ryder to slow down anytime soon. Their relationship is nothing but strong and resilient, which may keep them together in the foreseeable future. The first season of Landman ends with Tommy coming across a coyote that shows up in his front yard. The animal encounters the corpse of another, which was killed in the 9th episode by the Landman's neighbor. After seeing the coyote, Tommy grows concerned and even tells the animal that it should run away because the land they share is not a place where it can thrive or remain alive. He says this likely because he sees himself in the coyote. Like the beast, the Landman has roamed around the state and enjoyed his freedom for a long time. However, his independence has always caused him trouble. Tommy is nearly killed by Jimenez when he tries to handle the predicament freely. Over the years, every adversary or unfavorable situation has taught him that existence is a game with several rules. The Landman may have realized that he can only survive or, in other words, remain alive if he plays the game following the same rules. Now that he is the president of MTEX Oil, his hands are tied more than ever. His freedom is rewarded by limitations and near-death experiences, rather than a sense of independence. These realizations also apply to the coyotes. Even though we believe that animals are free, they can only enjoy freedom if they don't break the rules set by humans. Once they take their freedom to the front yard of a woman with a gun, they are killed mercilessly. In a way, both Tommy and the coyote are suffering from the same lack of independence. From his experience, he tells the animal to run away before it gets killed, a fate that remains on the horizon for the Landman.